The death of Peju, Ugboma'S, an award-winning pastry chef based in Lagos, has sent shockwaves through social circles in the city. Accusations of gross negligence on the part of Premier Specialist Hospital have trailed the story.
Meanwhile, the Lagos state government has said it would investigate allegations of medical negligence leveled against Premier Specialist Medical Center, Victoria Island, leading to the death of Peju Ugboma'S. Also, the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission says it's investigating possible violation of patient and consumer rights in the deaths of both Peju Ugboma'S and Omolara Omoyajowo. Joining us now is Fccp Executive Vice Chairman or Chief Executive BABATUNDE IRUKERA. Good to have you join us, sir. We're glad that you're weighing in on what seems to be a very sad circumstances, but some would say, and sorry to seem so direct, where have you been? Many of us weren't aware of the fact that you're the foremost competition and consumer protection authority in Nigeria.
Well, we've been in the forefront, on the front lines, and we've been doing this for quite a while. As a matter of fact, approximately 1 year ago in March, we conducted a pretty large investigation in similar circumstances with respect to a young lady who had suffered injuries on account of a violent crime, and where there were allegations that the hospital did not sufficiently care for her while awaiting a police report. I confront almost every time people who say they don't know of the FCCPC or the work it does. I don't know what to say. We're doing the work on a daily basis, and quite a number of people do know about what we're doing.
Well, for clarity purpose, please permit me to read from a press statement you issued yesterday. According to the Act establishing your commission, you do not make determinations with respect to the professionalism or adopted procedures of qualified and authorized professionals. So can you clarify and explain to our global audience watching at the moment the objective and the scope of this investigation into the alleged medical negligence leading to death of these two women? What would the scope and objective then be?
And so there are two things. One thing is professional misconduct. And in most regulated professions, there's ethical codes, and there are your licensees, and there's a holder of that license who provides those licenses to you, whether you're a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant. And the licensor, many times the state, reserves the prerogative for discipline. And so in this kind of a situation, discipline for doctors is by the Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria. And so our role is not to look at whether people complied with the ethical standards or professional standards set in their professions. What we do is we look purely at the consumer. And if a consumer has been injured, potentially is someone accountable for that injury? Was it a failure on someone's account or not? And what is the appropriate remedy for the consumer? And so that's where we come at it from. And that is what our role in this would be. And sometimes it calls for collaboration with regulatory authorities in charge of discipline. In fact, many times it does. But we shouldn't conflate the issues. That's not what this is about. I'm a lawyer by training, and I'm answerable to the disciplinary process of the Nigerian Bar Association and the Washington State Bar. And many times when there's a grievance filed against a lawyer, it's really about whether that lawyer lived up to certain ethical obligations. Sometimes it's not even the resolution of a lawyer's conduct may not necessarily redound to the benefit of the injured client. And for a doctor, the resolution of a doctor's misconduct may not necessarily redound to the benefit of an injured patient. But the role of a competition, or certainly a consumer protection authority, is to ensure that there are remedies and as much as possible to protect consumers in the future.
Okay, following on from that and looking at the protection of the consumer, so should we take from what you're saying that any recommendations you make will be referred to in a court of law? I'm just trying to get a sense of how your expertise will weigh in to the benefit of the consumer if they were to pursue this case in court.
Good. So those are very important questions. Under the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Act, the Commission is empowered to award compensation, and consumers have three options. One is they can do nothing about their injury. The second thing is that they can go to the regulator, in this case, the Fccp. The third is that they can go to court. And of the third option, of the second option rather, after a commission's determination, you can still go to court. And the commission's determination does not preclude judicial review of the conduct of the commission or judicial review of the dispute between the consumer and the service provider. Understand that primarily what we do is when someone goes to court, they're looking to enforce their own rights. A regulator looks to enforce the right of a particular consumer, but also has a bigger objective, which is to modify the space to ensure that other consumers do not experience inappropriate or unnecessary injury.
And as the protector of consumer rights in Nigeria, I wonder how serious are these alleged obnoxious services and failure of professional standards in the health sector? How rampant are they? How often do we see them?
Well, I'd say that we see a lot of allegations, perhaps too many. However, it's a very, very regulated industry and requiring all kinds of expertise and very complex also. And so allegations do not necessarily by themselves constitute violations. That's what they are, they're allegations. And the nature of medicine is such that it is inevitable that sometimes you have undesirable outcomes. And then when you have undesirable outcomes, that is not per se evidence of inappropriate conduct. And so what would happen is we would look at the allegations, we would investigate, we would ask questions, we would look at materials, and we'll come to what we consider a fair determination of what went wrong and who went wrong, if anybody did.
And if I could just follow up on that, given that you've been doing this before, how long is this investigation likely to take place? What's the time frame?
Then again, it depends on many factors. I'm hopeful that in these two investigations that we opened yesterday, that we can move very quickly. Many times, complex investigations of this nature could take months. I gave you an example of one that we conducted that opened very late in 2019. It went to a full-blown hearing in March last year. We've been held up by COVID. As a matter of fact, in the coming days, the interim findings and some preliminary orders in that particular investigation would be handed out or handed down. But in this particular cases, I'm hopeful that in the coming months, we can come to some closure.
Okay, I'd like to ask you, you said your role is to modify the space. You're looking beyond the individual case to the bigger picture. What would you say? My colleague asked how many cases, and you said more than you can count. But how often do you find that the Medical and Dental Association actually find any of their, their people, for lack of a better word, their doctors, guilty of an offense like this, of negligence?
And so the numbers would not speak to anything as far as diligence. The reason is, in many situations where we would find injury, it's not necessarily on account of misconduct. Our own role is irrelevant whether a professional complied with the ethics of the profession or not. There are certain standards of care that you owe your clients, your patients, your customers, or consumers generally. When you do not live up to those standards, then you would have to deal with a consumer protector. But not living up to those standards may not necessarily mean that you have violated the ethical standards for your profession. And the way we proceed in our work is that once there's injury, there's got to be a remedy. Whereas look at something like medicine. An injury doesn't necessarily constitute misconduct. And so I would say that you cannot use the scorecard of the cases that we evaluate would not be an appropriate scorecard to determine if the Medical and Dental Council is doing the right thing or not. I would say that they've been quite proactive. Recently, there was a doctor who wasn't cooperative with the investigative procedure under the rules with the Fccp, and we started prosecuting that doctor for failure to comply with the rules. And one of the things that came out of opening that prosecution is the Medical and Dental Council looked into the conduct of the doctor.
Okay.
I understand that doctor is currently suspended while the investigation is going on.
BABATUNDE IRUKERA, thank you so much for being on Newsday. Hopefully you keep us in the loop as you commence this investigation into the death of these two women. Thank you so much.